Since you couldn't provide us with an heir, here, take this anniversary gift, my father-in-law declared smugly. When I opened the box, divorce papers stared back at me. I looked toward my husband. He turned his face away. Then my mother-in-law introduced a 25-year-old woman as his new wife. Silently I signed. Then my best friend slid an envelope from her purse. The color drained from my father-in-law's face as he read it. "We have such a wonderful surprise for you, Catherine," Sharon announced as dessert was being served at our anniversary dinner. The timing felt deliberate, calculated to catch me off guard when I was relaxed and surrounded by people I trusted. Mason pushed back his chair and stood, commanding attention from every guest at the elegantly set table. The crystal and china I had so carefully arranged suddenly felt like props in a play I had not auditioned for. But let me step back and explain how I arrived at this moment. Sitting in that dining room surrounded by family and friends, completely unaware that my world was about to shatter. The morning of our second anniversary had begun with such promise. I woke before dawn, my body buzzing with excitement that made sleep impossible. 2 years. Timothy and I had reached our second anniversary, and tonight we would celebrate with everyone who mattered to us. I slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake my husband, and padded to our kitchen in bare feet. Before we continue with Catherine's story, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these experiences that matter to so many women. If you believe that every marriage deserves honesty and respect, please consider subscribing. It helps us reach more women who need to hear these stories. Now let's see what Catherine discovered next. The house felt different in those pre-dawn hours, filled with possibility and anticipation. Sunlight had not yet begun filtering through our lace curtains, but I could see our wedding photos on the mantel and the soft glow of the street lamp outside. There we were, frozen in that perfect moment when we promised each other forever. Timothy's face radiant with joy as he slipped the ring onto my finger, my dress billowing around us like a cloud of hope and dreams. I touched my wedding ring as I started the coffee, spinning the gold band around my finger the way I always did when I needed reassurance. The metal had grown warm from my skin over the past 2 years, molding itself to fit perfectly. It felt like part of me now, as natural as breathing. Timothy appeared in the kitchen doorway just as I was plating his favorite breakfast. Blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup. Turkey bacon crispy exactly the way he preferred. Fresh orange juice I had squeezed by hand the night before. The kitchen smelled like contentment itself, filled with the aromas of butter and vanilla and freshly ground coffee beans. "Happy anniversary," I said softly, expecting him to cross the room and kiss me the way he had on our first anniversary. Instead, he paused in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Yes," he replied simply. 2 years. Something in his tone made me look up from the pancakes, but he had already turned his attention to the morning newspaper. The familiar rustle of pages filled the space between us, creating a barrier I could not understand. Timothy had always been quiet in the mornings, but this silence felt different, heavier, more deliberate. I dismissed my uneasiness as anniversary nerves. Men handled celebrations differently than women, I reasoned. Where I felt excitement bubbling up like champagne, he probably felt the weight of expectation, the pressure to make the evening perfect for our families. The afternoon found me at Mason and Sharon's house, transforming their formal dining room into the perfect setting for our celebration. Sharon directed my efforts with her usual mixture of criticism disguised as helpful suggestions, but there was something different about her energy today. She practically vibrated with excitement as we arranged flowers and polished silverware. "You seem particularly happy today," I observed, carefully placing roses in the crystal vase that had been her wedding gift to us. "Oh, Catherine," Sharon replied, and her smile was broader than I had ever seen it. "Tonight is going to be such a special evening. Such a relief, really. We have been anticipating this moment for quite some time." Mason nodded from his leather armchair where he observed our preparations with the satisfaction of a general surveying his troops before battle. 2 years provides adequate time for evaluation," he said, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he used when making pronouncements about family matters. "Tonight we celebrate making necessary decisions." Their words felt warm and inclusive, as if they were finally welcoming me fully into their family circle. I had worked so desperately for this acceptance, enduring countless family dinners where subtle criticisms were delivered with surgical precision. Every holiday gathering where I smiled through pointed questions about grandchildren. Every social event where I felt like I was auditioning for a role I believed I had already earned through marriage. The dining room transformed under our combined efforts, becoming a showcase worthy of the celebration I imagined we were creating. Fresh flowers filled every surface with the scent of roses and baby's breath. Crystal glasses caught the afternoon light and sent tiny rainbows dancing across the pristine white tablecloth. The good china, each piece worth more than most families spent on monthly groceries, gleamed under the chandelier I had spent an hour cleaning to perfection. As guests began arriving that evening, I felt that familiar surge of pride that came with successful entertaining. Our friends and extended family filled the house with laughter and conversation, their voices mixing with the classical music I had selected for background ambiance. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. Yet as the evening progressed, I began noticing subtle undercurrents I could not quite identify. Guests offered congratulations that felt somehow hollow, their embraces lasting a moment too long as if they were saying goodbye rather than celebrating. Conversations quieted when I approached, and meaningful glances were exchanged when people thought I was not observing. My Aunt Patricia pulled me aside during cocktails, her weathered hands clasping mine with unusual intensity. "Catherine, dear, are you feeling well? You look rather pale this evening." "Just excited," I replied, though her question made me suddenly self-conscious. "Anniversary nerves, I suppose." She studied my face with the penetrating gaze she had perfected during her years as a high school principal. "If you ever need anything, Catherine, anything at all, you know you can call me." Her words carried an undertone I could not decipher, as if she were offering help for problems I did not know I had. Before I could ask what she meant, Timothy appeared at my elbow with a forced smile and guided me away to greet other guests. Throughout the cocktail hour, Timothy maintained careful physical distance from me, avoiding the casual touches and shared glances that typically characterized our public interactions. When guests asked about our marriage or future plans, he provided vague responses and quickly redirected conversations to safer topics. His behavior reminded me of someone steeling himself for an unpleasant but necessary task. Dinner proceeded with all the formal elegance Sharon had insisted upon. Course after carefully planned course appeared before our guests, each dish selected to demonstrate sophisticated taste and attention to detail. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the wine, touching on safe topics of weather and community news while carefully avoiding anything too personal or controversial. I should have been enjoying myself, basking in the successful execution of weeks of careful planning. Instead, I found myself studying faces around the table, searching for clues about the strange undercurrents I sensed but could not identify. Everyone seemed to be performing rather than celebrating, as if they were all following a script I had never seen. As dessert was being served, Sharon rose from her seat with the air of someone about to make an important announcement. The chocolate mousse I had specifically requested from the caterer sat untouched before me as my stomach clenched with sudden apprehension. "We have such a wonderful surprise for you, Catherine," she said, and I realized that whatever was about to happen had been carefully orchestrated for this exact moment. The timing, the setting, the audience of people I loved and trusted most in the world. All of it designed to maximize the impact of whatever surprise awaited me. Mason pushed back his chair and commanded attention from every guest at the table. In that moment, surrounded by crystal and china and flowers I had arranged with such care, I finally understood that I was not the host of this celebration. I was its target. The applause died down as Mason settled back into his chair, but the tension in the room remained thick as fog. I forced a smile, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for my water glass. Something fundamental had shifted during his speech, though I could not yet identify what it was. The faces around our dining table wore expressions I could not decipher. Anticipation mixed with something that looked uncomfortably like pity. But this moment of unease was not my first warning that something was wrong with my marriage. The signs had been accumulating for weeks, like hairline cracks in a foundation that I had chosen to ignore rather than examine. 3 weeks earlier, I had been organizing our paperwork for tax season when I discovered the first piece of evidence that my perfect marriage was built on lies. Buried beneath insurance documents and utility bills, I found a cell phone statement that did not belong to our family plan. The letterhead was familiar, our wireless company, but the account number was wrong. My hands shook as I studied the itemized charges. Hundreds of text messages and phone calls to a number I had never seen before. The dates and times told a story that made my stomach clench with growing dread. Late-night conversations when Timothy claimed to be sleeping beside me. Afternoon calls during work hours when he supposedly could not be reached. Weekend texts exchanged while he sat in our living room, claiming to be checking work emails. The frequency had increased dramatically over the past 3 months. What began as occasional contact had evolved into daily communication, sometimes lasting for hours. Someone in my husband's life had become important enough to warrant this level of attention, this level of secrecy. When Timothy came home that evening, I was waiting in our kitchen with the phone bills spread across the counter like evidence in a criminal trial. "Can you explain this to me?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Timothy's face went through a series of rapid transformations. Confusion, recognition, guilt, and finally defensive anger. "You went through my personal papers? They were mixed in with our joint tax documents," I replied. I was not snooping. I was organizing. "That is work-related," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "My boss requires a separate line for certain projects. Confidentiality issues." "Your boss requires you to text at midnight?" Timothy's jaw tightened. You are being paranoid, Catherine. This kind of suspicious behavior is exactly why our marriage has problems. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Our marriage had problems? This was news to me, though apparently it was not news to him. What problems? Timothy, I do not understand what is happening here. Everything has to be about you, does not it? His voice rose with a frustration that seemed to have been building for months. You question everything I do, everywhere I go, everyone I talk to. It is suffocating. He grabbed his keys from the counter and headed for the door. I need air. I need space. I need to not be interrogated in my own home. The front door slammed with finality, leaving me alone with the phone bill and the crushing realization that my husband was keeping secrets that required professional-level deception to maintain. 2 days later, the grocery store encounter added another piece to the puzzle I was beginning to recognize. I was selecting vegetables for dinner when I noticed a young woman staring at me with uncomfortable intensity. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made me immediately self-conscious about my own appearance. My hair that never quite held its style. My clothes that suddenly felt frumpy and outdated. You must be Catherine, she said, approaching with obvious nervousness. I am sorry. Do we know each other? I am Judith, she replied, her hands trembling slightly as she introduced herself. I work with Timothy. He mentions you sometimes. Timothy rarely discussed his colleagues with me, and he certainly had never mentioned anyone named Judith. Her nervousness seemed disproportionate to a casual grocery store encounter. She kept glancing around as if she expected someone to catch us talking. He told me about your anniversary party, Judith continued. It sounds like it will be lovely. This struck me as particularly odd. Timothy had been reluctant to discuss our celebration, claiming he preferred private moments to public displays. Why would he share details with a coworker he had never mentioned? How thoughtful of him to talk about our marriage at work, I said carefully, studying her face for clues about what she was not telling me. Judith's smile faltered. Oh, he does not really discuss your marriage. He talks about other things. Personal things. She paused, seeming to realize she had revealed too much. I should go. It was nice meeting you, Catherine. She hurried toward the exit with obvious urgency, leaving me standing in the produce section with questions multiplying in my mind like cancer cells. Personal things. What personal things would Timothy share with a beautiful young coworker that he could not discuss with his wife? The weekly dinner at Mason and Sharon's house the following Sunday provided another layer of understanding about the precarious position I occupied in this family. What had once felt like mild criticism now revealed itself as systematic evaluation, a performance review that I was apparently failing. Margaret's daughter just had the most beautiful baby, Sharon announced as we sat down to her perfectly prepared roast. Such a blessing for their family. Grandchildren bring such joy. She glanced meaningfully at my flat stomach, and I felt the familiar flush of shame that accompanied these conversations. The Johnsons are expecting their second grandchild, Sharon continued relentlessly, and the Pattersons just welcomed their third. It seems like everyone our age is enjoying the fruits of successful marriages. Mason joined the assault with surgical precision. Successful marriages typically produce children within the first year. It demonstrates compatibility, shared values, biological fitness. I tried to redirect the conversation to safer topics, but Sharon persisted with observations about family legacy and the importance of continuing bloodlines. Her words were carefully chosen to wound while maintaining plausible deniability. This was not outright cruelty. This was strategic demoralization. Timothy sat through these exchanges in complete silence, neither defending me nor redirecting the conversation away from my apparent failures. His passive participation in my humiliation was perhaps more devastating than his parents' active cruelty. I excused myself to the bathroom, where I pressed my back against the door and cried silently while their voices continued in the dining room. Through the thin walls, I could hear them discussing my inadequacies as if I were a faulty appliance they were considering replacing. 2 years should have been adequate time, Mason was saying. Perhaps the problem is more fundamental than we initially believed, Sharon replied. Timothy's voice was too quiet to distinguish words, but his tone suggested agreement rather than protest. When I returned to the table, the conversation had moved to safer topics, but the damage was done. I understood now that my position in this family was conditional, probationary, subject to performance metrics I was apparently failing to meet. The phone call from my mother came that Thursday evening while I stirred soup that would go uneaten because Timothy was working late again. Her voice carried the worry that only mothers can perfectly calibrate to pierce through their children's defenses. Catherine, honey, you sounded so tired during our last conversation. Are you sleeping enough? Eating properly? I am fine, Mom. Just busy with anniversary planning. Timothy missed Easter dinner with us, and Christmas felt strained. Is everything all right between you two? The question hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore but dangerous to acknowledge. How could I explain that my husband was becoming a stranger, that his family treated me like a disappointing employee, that I was discovering evidence of deceptions I could not yet fully understand? "We are fine," I lied. "Just the normal adjustments of married life." "Catherine," my mother's voice carried the authority of someone who had raised 3 children and survived 35 years of marriage. "You know you can tell me anything. If you need help, if you need to come home for a while, if you need anything at all." The offer of refuge was both comforting and terrifying. It meant she saw what I was trying so hard to hide, that my perfect marriage was crumbling and I was too proud or too frightened to ask for help. "I will visit soon," I promised, knowing I was avoiding her perceptive questions about the state of my relationship. "I love you, sweetheart. Remember that you deserve to be happy." After she hung up, I stood in my empty kitchen holding the phone and wondering when happiness had become something I had to remember I deserved rather than something I naturally expected. Now, sitting at this anniversary dinner with Mason preparing to make his announcement, I realized that all those warning signs had been leading to this moment. The mysterious phone calls, the beautiful coworker, the family's growing impatience, my mother's worried questions. All of it had been building toward whatever surprise awaited me in this perfectly appointed dining room. The dessert sat untouched before me as Mason cleared his throat with theatrical authority. Mason cleared his throat with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. But before he could begin his announcement, my mind drifted to the medical appointment that had taken place just 48 hours earlier. The memory felt both distant and immediate, like looking at photographs of someone else's life while simultaneously living every moment with painful clarity. Erica had insisted on driving me to Dr. Patterson's office. Her enthusiasm about finally getting definitive answers both comforting and overwhelming. The fertility clinic occupied the 3rd floor of a gleaming medical building, its sterile corridors lined with motivational posters featuring smiling mothers and chubby babies. The irony was not lost on me, surrounded by images of successful pregnancies while I sat there documenting 2 years of failure. "Just think," Erica had whispered as we waited in the reception area, "by Thursday we might have the answer you have been hoping for." The forms felt like confessions written in medical terminology. How many months had I been trying to conceive? 24. Had I experienced any pregnancies, successful or otherwise? 12. Was I currently experiencing marital stress that might impact conception? I had stared at that question for a full minute before checking the box marked, "Sometimes." Dr. Patterson was a kind woman in her 50s who had delivered half the babies in our town. Her examination room was painted in soothing pastels, but nothing could soften the clinical reality of what we were investigating. My body's apparent refusal to cooperate with the most basic expectation of marriage. "Tell me about your stress levels," Dr. Patterson had said during the examination, her tone gentle but probing. "Normal, I suppose. The usual pressures of married life. Are you happy in your marriage, Catherine?" The question had hung in the air between us like an accusation. Erica squeezed my hand from her chair beside the examination table, and I realized that my hesitation before answering had revealed more than any words could have. "Yes," I had finally replied, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. The blood draw felt like my last hope being extracted through a needle. Each vial represented another chance for my body to redeem itself, to prove that I was worthy of the name I carried, worthy of the family I had married into. Erica held my other hand during the procedure, her fingers warm and steady while mine trembled with nervous energy. "The results will be ready by Wednesday," Dr. Patterson had said. "We will call with the findings." Now, sitting at our anniversary dinner, I wondered if those test results might arrive in time to change whatever announcement Mason was preparing to make. Perhaps positive news could salvage a marriage that felt increasingly precarious with each passing day. The confrontation with Timothy 3 nights after the medical appointment had shattered what remained of my illusions about our relationship. I had approached him in our bedroom as he prepared for sleep, armed with brochures about fertility treatments and a desperate hope that medical intervention might bridge the growing chasm between us. "Timothy, I have been thinking about what Dr. Patterson said. There are options we have not explored yet, treatments that might help us conceive." His response was immediate and devastating in its coldness. "Maybe we are not meant to have children together, Catherine. Maybe this is our bodies telling us something we should listen to." The words struck me like physical blows. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that perhaps this marriage was a mistake from the beginning. Perhaps we have been trying to force something that was never meant to work." I stared at this stranger who wore my husband's face but spoke with the voice of someone who had already departed from our relationship emotionally. "Is there someone else, Timothy?" His silence stretched between us like a guilty verdict. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat and final. "I think I should sleep in the guest room tonight. We both need space to think about what we really want." That night marked the beginning of a new phase in our marriage, one where we lived as strangers sharing a house, maintaining appearances while privately acknowledging that something fundamental had broken beyond repair. The discovery of Mason and Sharon's true feelings about me came during a routine family gathering the following Sunday. I had volunteered to help Sharon serve dessert, a gesture that had once felt like daughterly devotion but now felt more like desperate performance art. The pantry where Sharon stored her good serving dishes was located just off the dining room, separated by a thin wall that did nothing to muffle conversations. I was reaching for the crystal cake plates when I heard my name spoken with undisguised contempt. "Catherine has proven herself incapable of fulfilling the most basic requirement of marriage," Sharon was saying to Mason, 2 years without even a miscarriage to show for it. At her age, if it was going to happen naturally, it would have happened by now. "The girl is defective," Mason replied with the casual cruelty of someone discussing faulty merchandise. "Timothy deserves better. A wife who can actually produce children instead of making excuses." My hands froze on the serving dishes as their conversation continued with increasing viciousness. They discussed my appearance, my personality, my worthiness as a family member with a detached analysis of judges delivering a verdict. Each word carved away another piece of my self-worth, leaving me hollow and shaking in the small, dark space. "We need to find Timothy a more suitable wife," Sharon concluded. "Someone younger, proven fertile from a better family background." When I finally emerged from the pantry with the serving dishes, my hands were trembling so violently that the crystal rattled like wind chimes. Sharon looked up from her position at the dining room table where she had been arranging napkins with military precision. "Catherine, do you look pale? Are you feeling well?" The concern in her voice felt like mockery after what I had just overheard. These people who smiled at me across family dinner tables were actively plotting the destruction of my marriage. The family I had tried so desperately to please had already decided I was unworthy of their acceptance. Despite this growing evidence of betrayal and rejection, I threw myself into planning our anniversary celebration with manic determination. The party became my last desperate attempt to prove my worth, to demonstrate that I was valuable enough to keep despite my apparent biological failures. I spent hours selecting flowers that would photograph beautifully, choosing a menu that would impress even Sharon's critical standards, crafting invitations that struck the perfect balance between elegant and warm. Each decision felt weighted with significance, as if the success of the party might somehow save a marriage that was clearly beyond salvaging. The irony was suffocating. I was planning a celebration of a relationship that had become a source of daily humiliation. I was investing time, money, and emotional energy into commemorating a union that the other parties involved apparently considered a failure. Yet I clung to the ritual of celebration as if it were a life raft in an ocean of uncertainty. Every detail I arranged felt like evidence in my favor, proof that I was worthy of love despite my inability to conceive. The expensive linens, the carefully chosen wine, the perfectly coordinated color scheme, all of it was testimony to my value as a wife and family member. But even as I wrote checks and made final arrangements, I knew I was planning my own wake. The anniversary party had become less about celebrating our marriage and more about saying goodbye to the life I had thought we were building together. Now, as Mason prepared to deliver whatever announcement he had planned for this moment, I realized that all my careful preparations had been for this. Not a celebration, but a carefully orchestrated ending that I had unknowingly helped to stage. The dessert sat untouched before me as the weight of expectations I could never meet pressed down like a crushing stone. Mason's throat clearing seemed to echo longer than it should have, and in that stretched moment, I became acutely aware of how this entire day had felt like a performance where everyone except me had received the script in advance. The morning had begun with Mason arriving at our house earlier than expected, his arms laden with flowers and wine that I had not requested for the evening celebration. His greeting was effusive in a way that felt completely unnatural, his embrace lasting several beats too long while his eyes held mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Catherine, my dear daughter-in-law," he had said, the endearment rolling off his tongue with theatrical precision. "Tonight will be such a special evening, such a memorable evening. I hope you are prepared for how special it will be." The repetition of special felt like a warning disguised as enthusiasm. Sharon had been equally strange, practically vibrating with anticipation as she fluttered around our kitchen, rearranging items that did not need rearranging and offering suggestions for improvements that were really commands wrapped in false politeness. "You should wear your blue dress tonight, Catherine, the one with the high neckline, very appropriate for the occasion." When had my mother-in-law ever cared about my clothing choices? When had she ever offered fashion advice that did not come barbed with criticism? Yet here she was, treating me with a solicitousness that felt more ominous than her usual cold disapproval. Timothy had been avoiding me all day, claiming nervousness about hosting family members, but his demeanor suggested guilt rather than social anxiety. He moved through our house like a man preparing for an execution, checking his watch repeatedly and starting every time the phone rang. When I tried to engage him in conversation about last-minute party details, his responses were monosyllabic and distracted. "Did you confirm the wine delivery? I had asked while arranging flowers in our living room. Yes. What about the extra chairs from your parents' house? Handled. Timothy, are you feeling well? You seem tense. He had looked at me then with an expression I could not decipher. Pain perhaps? Or regret? I am fine, Catherine. Just want everything to go smoothly tonight. But nothing about his behavior suggested he wanted the evening to go smoothly. Everything about his behavior suggested he was dreading whatever was about to unfold. Erica's arrival provided the first genuine moment of warmth I had experienced all day. She swept into our house with her characteristic energy, but even she seemed different tonight. Her excitement was palpable, almost manic, and she clutched her purse with protective intensity. "Catherine," she exclaimed, embracing me with fierce affection. I can barely contain myself. This is going to be the best anniversary party ever. I pulled back to study her face, noting the bright flush in her cheeks and the way her eyes sparkled with barely contained secrets. "Erica, you look like you are about to burst. What has gotten into you? I told you I have the perfect gift for you. The timing is going to be absolutely perfect. Life-changing, Catherine. This gift is going to change everything." She kept touching her purse as she spoke, her fingers tracing the outline of what I assumed was an envelope. The gesture was both protective and reverent, as if she were carrying something precious and fragile. "You are making me nervous with all this mystery," I said, but her enthusiasm was infectious. For the first time all day, I felt a flutter of genuine hope. Perhaps whatever surprise Erica had planned would counterbalance the strange tension that had been building since morning. "Trust me," she whispered, squeezing my hands. "When the moment is right, when it will have maximum impact, I will give it to you. Make everyone in this room understand just how special you are." Her presence anchored me in a way that nothing else had that day. While Timothy's family made me feel like an outsider performing for their approval, Erica made me feel seen and valued for who I was rather than what I could provide. As guests began arriving, the social dynamics of the party felt immediately wrong in ways I could not articulate. Extended family members and old friends filtered through our front door with congratulations that rang hollow and embraces that felt more like condolences than celebrations. My cousin Michael, usually boisterous at family gatherings, seemed subdued and kept avoiding eye contact when he spoke to me. "Congratulations, Catherine. I hope tonight brings you everything you deserve." Everything I deserved? Why did that sound less like a blessing and more like a threat? Mrs. Henderson from down the street, normally full of cheerful chatter about neighborhood gossip, offered unusually elaborate compliments that sounded rehearsed. "Catherine, dear, you look absolutely radiant tonight. So brave, so dignified. I have always admired your strength." Brave? Dignified? These were not words typically associated with anniversary celebrations. These were words reserved for people facing adversity with grace. Throughout the cocktail hour, I caught glimpses of meaningful exchanges between guests when they thought I was not observing. Raised eyebrows, subtle nods, whispered conversations that ceased abruptly when I approached. The social fabric of the party felt charged with information that everyone possessed except me. My Aunt Patricia cornered me near the fireplace, her weathered hands grasping mine with unusual urgency. "Catherine, sweetheart, you look terribly pale. Are you feeling well? Have you been eating enough?" "I am fine, Aunt Patricia. Just excited about the celebration." She studied my face with the penetrating gaze she had perfected during decades of teaching high school students. "If you ever need anything, Catherine, anything at all, you have my number. Promise me you will call if you need help." Help with what? Why did everyone seem to believe I would need assistance with something? What crisis were they all anticipating that I remained oblivious to? Timothy's behavior throughout the evening confirmed my growing suspicion that he was preparing for something that required significant psychological fortification. He drank more heavily than I had ever seen him drink at a family gathering. His usual one glass of wine replaced by multiple trips to the bar cart. He maintained careful physical distance from me, avoiding the casual touches and shared glances that normally characterized our public interactions. When guests asked about our marriage or future plans, his responses were vague and quickly redirected to safer topics like work or sports. I watched him check his watch obsessively, as if he were waiting for a specific moment to arrive. His conversations with his father always ended abruptly when I approached. Their whispered exchanges carrying an urgency that made my stomach clench with apprehension. "Timothy," I whispered during a brief moment when we found ourselves alone in the kitchen. "What is wrong with you tonight? You are acting like you are attending a funeral rather than our anniversary party." He looked at me with eyes that seemed to hold apologies for crimes not yet committed. "Catherine, I just want you to know that none of this was personal. None of this was because you are not a good person. None of what was not personal. Timothy, you are scaring me." But before he could respond, Sharon appeared in the doorway with the announcement that dinner was ready to be served. Now, as Mason prepared to make whatever announcement had been planned for this moment, I realized that every strange interaction, Every meaningful glance, every whispered conversation had been leading to this. The dessert sat untouched before me as the weight of impending revelation pressed down like a gathering storm about to break. The storm that had been building all evening finally broke with Mason's next words. "Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends," he began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone delivering a verdict that had already been decided. "We have gathered tonight not just to mark Catherine and Timothy's second anniversary, but to address some very important family matters." A chill ran down my spine as the room fell completely silent. Even the soft classical music that had been playing in the background seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Mason reached into his jacket pocket with theatrical precision, producing an envelope that looked official and ominous in the candlelight. He held it high enough for everyone to see, like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. "Marriage," he continued, his gaze settling on me with uncomfortable intensity, "is an institution with specific purposes. When those purposes are not fulfilled after a reasonable period of time, difficult decisions must be made for the good of all involved parties." My mouth went dry. The dessert fork trembled in my hand as I set it down on the china plate with a soft clink that seemed to echo through the silent room. "Catherine, my dear," Mason said, and his endearment felt like a blade wrapped in silk, "you have been part of our family for exactly 2 years. That represents adequate time to evaluate the success of this union and make necessary adjustments for the future." Timothy stood frozen beside his father's chair, his face pale as parchment, his eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond my shoulder. He looked like a man standing before a firing squad, except he was not the one about to be executed. "Since you could not provide us with an heir," Mason continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Here, take this anniversary gift." The envelope materialized before me, held steady by Mason's confident hand. Around the table, I could hear sharp intakes of breath from some guests, while others leaned forward with the morbid fascination of spectators at a public execution. My hand shook as I accepted the envelope. The paper felt expensive, substantial, weighted with importance that I was only beginning to understand. The return address was embossed with the logo of a law firm I did not recognize. "Open it, Catherine," Sharon urged from across the table, her voice bright with barely contained excitement. "We are all so eager to see your reaction." The envelope seemed to grow heavier in my trembling hands. Part of me wanted to set it down unopened, to preserve for just a few more moments the illusion that my life was not about to change irrevocably. But 45 pairs of eyes were watching me, waiting for my response to whatever lay inside. I tore open the seal with fingers that felt disconnected from my body. The legal documents inside were crisp and formal, their official letterhead making everything feel suddenly, terrifyingly real. "Petition for dissolution of marriage," I read aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. The formal legal language could not disguise the brutal reality of what I was holding. Timothy had met with attorneys. He had filed paperwork. He had planned my abandonment with the same methodical precision that other couples use to plan vacations. The room began to spin as I processed the terminology that reduced our marriage to a contractual arrangement being terminated due to irreconcilable differences stemming from the respondent's failure to conceive children within a reasonable time frame. Timothy. I looked up at my husband, desperate for some sign that this was an elaborate cruel joke, that he would step forward and explain that this was all a misunderstanding. Instead he remained frozen beside his father, his silence speaking louder than any confession could have. The man I had shared a bed with for 2 years, the man whose breakfast I had prepared that very morning, could not even meet my eyes as I held the legal documentation of his betrayal. "There is more, Catherine," Sharon announced with the enthusiasm of someone unveiling the second act of an entertaining performance. "We would like you to meet someone very special." A young woman stepped forward from where she had been standing near the dining room doorway. I recognized her immediately. Judith from the grocery store. The nervous co-worker who had known about our anniversary party. But tonight she was not nervous. Tonight she was dressed in a blue silk dress that complemented her complexion perfectly, her hair styled with professional precision. "Catherine," Sharon continued with barely concealed glee, "I would like you to meet Judith, Timothy's fiancée. They plan to marry as soon as the divorce is finalized." The words hit me like physical blows. Fiancé. They were already engaged while I was still legally married to him. The betrayal had layers I was only beginning to understand. I looked at Judith more carefully now, noting details that had escaped me during our grocery store encounter. She was wearing earrings that looked familiar, delicate pearl drops that I suddenly recognized as belonging to Timothy's grandmother. Family heirlooms that had been promised to me were already adorning my replacement. "We wanted you to meet her properly," Mason explained with the tone of someone conducting a business transaction, "so there would be no confusion about the arrangements moving forward. Judith comes from an excellent family and she has already proven her ability to conceive." Proven her ability to conceive. The words echoed in my mind as I stared at this young woman who was apparently superior to me in the only way that mattered to this family. She was not just Timothy's mistress. She was his upgrade, carefully selected and evaluated for her reproductive potential. "The papers just need your signature, Catherine," Timothy finally spoke, his voice hoarse and strained. "I have already signed them. We can make this easy for everyone. Easy for everyone." As if there was an easy way to have your marriage dissolved in front of an audience of family and friends. As if there was an easy way to discover that your husband had been planning your replacement while you were arranging flowers for your anniversary celebration. I looked down at the papers again at the line marked with a yellow sticky note where my signature was required. The pen that Mason offered me felt impossibly heavy, weighted with the finality of what I was being asked to do. Around the table, guests shifted in their seats with the uncomfortable energy of people witnessing something they knew was wrong but felt powerless to stop. Some avoided eye contact entirely, while others watched with the fascination of spectators at a particularly dramatic theater performance. "Catherine," Erica's voice cut through the silence, and I looked up to see my best friend standing near the living room entrance, her face white with shock and fury. "Do not sign anything. Not yet," but I was beyond thinking clearly. The humiliation was complete, the betrayal absolute. These people who had pretended to care about me had systematically orchestrated my destruction, and they were doing it in front of everyone I knew. Through tears that made the legal documents blur before my eyes, I signed my name on the designated line. The pen scratched across the paper with finality, each letter of my signature sealing my fate and ending my marriage in the most public, humiliating way possible. The room erupted in relieved cheers and congratulations for Timothy, as if my pain was the price of admission to their celebration. The cheers and congratulations died instantly when Erica stepped forward, her face transformed from shock into something far more dangerous: cold, calculated fury. The earlier excitement I had noticed in her demeanor was still there, but now I understood its true nature. She had not been excited about celebrating my marriage. She had been excited about what she was carrying in that envelope, and witnessing my public humiliation had just given her the perfect moment to deploy it. "Since we are exchanging gifts," Erica announced, her voice slicing through the celebration with surgical precision, "I have one as well." The room's energy shifted instantly. Guests who had been raising their glasses in toasts to Timothy and Judith now turned toward Erica with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Mason, still basking in the afterglow of his successful orchestration of my humiliation, looked annoyed at this unexpected interruption. "Erica, dear," Sharon began, her tone carrying the patronizing sweetness she reserved for people she considered beneath her attention. "How lovely that you want to participate, but I think we have had enough excitement for one evening." "Oh, I disagree completely," Erica replied, her smile sharp as a blade. "I think this evening is just getting started." She reached into her purse with deliberate slowness, withdrawing the envelope she had been protecting all night. But instead of handing it to me as I had expected, she walked directly to Mason's end of the table. The symbolism was not lost on anyone in the room. She was challenging the patriarch directly, meeting power with power. "This envelope contains information that I believe will interest you greatly," Erica said, holding the document just out of Mason's reach. "Information about your daughter-in-law that might have influenced your decision-making tonight. Had you bothered to gather all the facts before proceeding with this performance?" Mason's confidence faltered for the first time all evening. "Young lady, I do not know what game you think you are playing." "But, no game," Erica interrupted, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Just truth, something that seems to be in short supply in this family." She placed the envelope on the table directly in front of Mason, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Open it." The room held its collective breath as Mason reached for the envelope with hands that were no longer quite steady. His earlier theatrical confidence was beginning to crack, replaced by the first stirrings of uncertainty. He tore open the seal and withdrew the single sheet of paper inside. I watched his face as he read, witnessing a transformation that was both terrible and satisfying. The color drained from his cheeks as if someone had opened a valve and let all the blood run out of his body. His triumphant smile dissolved like sugar in rain, replaced by an expression of dawning horror. "What does it say?" Sharon demanded, her voice sharp with anxiety as she watched her husband's face crumble. Mason's hands began to tremble, the paper rustling like autumn leaves in a windstorm. His eyes darted between the medical report and my tear-streaked face, his mind clearly struggling to process the magnitude of what he had just done. "It is a pregnancy test," he whispered, the words barely audible above the suddenly oppressive silence in the room. "Catherine is pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Not the expectant quiet of an audience waiting for the next act, but the hollow silence of a tomb. Guests who had been celebrating moments before now stared in shock and growing horror as the implications of the evening's events began to sink in. "Positive," Erica clarified, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned quiet. Confirmed by blood test 48 hours ago. Catherine is carrying your grandchild, Mason. The heir you claimed she could never provide. I found my voice then, drawing strength from somewhere deep inside myself that I had not known existed. Through my tears and heartbreak, I summoned every ounce of dignity I had left and spoke with a clarity that surprised even me. Congratulations, I said, looking directly at Mason with eyes that no longer held submission or the desperate desire for his approval. You just gave away your grandchild. The power shift in the room was immediate and complete. Mason, who had commanded the evening with such authoritative confidence, now looked like a man facing his own execution. The signed divorce papers that had represented his victory moments before now became evidence of his devastating miscalculation. Catherine, he stammered, his voice breaking on my name. Catherine, we did not know. We had no idea. Surely we can. Can what? I asked, my voice growing stronger with each word. Can undo the papers I just signed in front of 45 witnesses? Can pretend this evening never happened? Can take back the humiliation you orchestrated for your own entertainment? Timothy finally found his voice, stepping forward with his hands outstretched in a gesture that was both pleading and pathetic. Catherine, please, we can work this out. The papers do not have to be filed. We can tear them up right now. Work what out, Timothy? I asked, and the irony of the situation was so sharp it was almost funny. Work out our marriage that you have already legally dissolved. Work out your relationship with Judith, who is wearing your grandmother's earrings and planning to move into our house. Judith, who had been standing beside Sharon like a trophy on display, now looked like she wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. The triumph she had confidently moments before had evaporated, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that she had participated in the destruction of a pregnant woman's marriage. This is all a misunderstanding, Sharon interjected, her voice rising with desperate pitch. Unfortunate timing issue. We can make this right. We can. You can what? Erica interrupted, her fury now fully unleashed. You can undo the legal documents. You can erase the public humiliation. You can magically transform this celebration back into what Catherine thought it was. Mason was now openly begging, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Catherine, please, you must understand. We thought we were doing what was best for everyone. We thought. You thought wrong, I said simply. You thought you could dispose of me like defective merchandise and replace me with a newer model. You thought you could orchestrate my humiliation for your entertainment. You thought you could destroy my life without consequences. The legal reality of the signed documents was sinking in around the room. Even if I wanted to forgive this betrayal, even if I wanted to attempt reconciliation, the divorce papers created a legal barrier that could not be simply wished away. The wheels of dissolution were already in motion, set in stone by signatures and witnesses. The papers are signed, I continued, my voice steady despite the tears still streaming down my face. The marriage is over, and your grandchild will never know the family that threw him away before he was even born. The celebration that had begun with such cruel joy was now awake, mourning the death of relationships and possibilities that could never be resurrected. The silence that followed my declaration stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Around the dining room table, 45 faces stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to pity to dawning understanding of what they had just witnessed. But I was done being the object of their scrutiny, done being the victim of their entertainment. Erica appeared at my side as if summoned by some invisible signal, her arms sliding through mine with protective determination. Come on, she whispered, her voice gentle but firm. We are leaving. Catherine, please, Timothy called out as I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the sudden chaos. We can fix this. We can make this right. I turned to look at him one last time. This man who had shared my bed and my dreams and my morning coffee ritual. His face was pale with panic, his hands reaching toward me in a gesture that was 2 years too late. Fix what, Timothy? I asked, my voice steady despite the tears that continued to flow. Fix the legal documents I signed in front of everyone we know? Fix the humiliation you orchestrated? Fix the fact that you replaced me before you even divorced me? You had no answer for that. None of them did. Mason stumbled to his feet, his chair toppling backward in his haste. Catherine, you have to understand. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we can correct this. The papers do not have to be filed. We can tear them up right now. And then what? I asked, my voice growing stronger with each word. Pretend this evening never happened? Pretend you did not just publicly humiliate me for the entertainment of our family and friends? Pretend Judith is not standing there wearing your mother's jewelry and planning to move into my house? Sharon stepped forward, her face flushed with desperation. Catherine, dear, you must be reasonable. Families have misunderstandings. This can all be worked out. Think about the baby. Think about what is best for your child. The audacity of her words stopped me cold. What is best for my child, I repeated slowly, is to never know the family that threw him away before he was even born. With Erica's steadying presence beside me, I walked toward the dining room exit, leaving behind the crystal and china and carefully arranged flowers that had once represented my hopes for acceptance and belonging. My steps were measured and deliberate, each one carrying me further away from the life I had thought I wanted. Catherine. Mason's voice cracked as he called after me. You cannot do this. You cannot take our grandchild away from us. I paused at the threshold, turning back one final time to address the people who had just destroyed my world with such calculated precision. I am not taking your grandchild away from you, I said clearly. You gave him away when you handed me those divorce papers. The arguing voices and desperate pleading followed us through the front hallway, but they grew fainter with each step we took toward the door. Guests who had come expecting to celebrate an anniversary now found themselves witnesses to the complete implosion of a family, and I could hear their uncomfortable murmurs mixing with the increasingly frantic protests from Timothy and his parents. The cool night air hit my face like a blessing as Erica and I stepped onto the front porch. After the suffocating atmosphere of betrayal and cruelty inside Mason and Sharon's house, the October evening felt clean and purifying. I breathed deeply, filling my lungs with air that did not carry the weight of disappointment and judgment. Do not look back, Erica whispered as she guided me toward her car parked at the curb. Do not give them the satisfaction of seeing you hesitate. I kept my eyes fixed forward, focused on the red taillights of cars lining the street, on the porch lights of neighboring houses where other families were probably enjoying normal Tuesday evenings without drama or betrayal or public humiliation. With each step away from that house, I felt something lifting from my shoulders, a weight I had carried for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to walk without it. Behind us, the front door opened and Timothy's voice carried across the yard. Catherine, please, do not do this. But I was already climbing into Erica's passenger seat, already closing the door on that chapter of my life with a firm click that felt more final than any divorce papers could. Erica started the engine and pulled away from the curb with careful precision, her driving unusually slow and deliberate. In the safety of her car, surrounded by the familiar scent of her vanilla perfume and the soft jazz music playing on her radio, I finally allowed myself to completely fall apart. The sobs came from somewhere deep inside me, the kind of crying that involves your entire body and leaves you gasping for breath between waves of grief. 2 years of marriage, 2 years of trying to earn approval that was never going to come, 2 years of believing I was building something permanent with someone who was secretly planning my replacement. Let it out, Erica said softly, reaching across to squeeze my hand while keeping her eyes on the road. Let it all out. You have been holding this in for months. He was right. I had been carrying the weight of a failing marriage, absorbing the criticism and disappointment of Timothy's family, making excuses for behavior that should have been inexcusable. The relief of finally releasing all that suppressed pain was almost as overwhelming as the pain itself. I cannot believe they did that to you, Erica said, her voice shaking with fury. I cannot believe they planned that whole performance. It was cruel beyond anything I could have imagined. Through my tears, I managed to speak. You saved me, Erica. If you had not been there with those test results, if you had not stood up to them, you would have found another way, she replied firmly. You are stronger than they ever gave you credit for. Stronger than you gave yourself credit for. As we drove through our quiet suburban neighborhood, past houses where lights glowed warmly in kitchen windows and families were probably settling in for normal evenings together, I began to feel something unexpected stirring alongside my grief. It was relief pure and simple. The marriage that had been slowly suffocating me was over. The constant pressure to earn approval from people who would never accept me was finished. The pretense that we were building something beautiful together could finally be abandoned. Where do you want to go? Erica asked as we approached the intersection that would take us either to my house or hers. Home, I said without hesitation. I want to go home. The house that Timothy and I had shared looked different as Erica pulled into the driveway. The porch light I had left burning cast familiar shadows across the front yard, but something fundamental had shifted. This was no longer the home I shared with my husband. This was simply my house, the place where I would raise my child and build whatever came next. Erica helped me carry my overnight bag into the house, her presence filling the silence that had once felt oppressive but now seemed peaceful. As I moved through rooms that contained 2 years of shared memories with Timothy, I realized that the house no longer felt like a shrine to a failed marriage. It felt like the beginning of something entirely new. I should call my mother, I said, settling onto the couch where Timothy and I had once watched television together in the evenings. The familiar furniture looked different now, transformed by the knowledge that I would be the only adult making decisions about what happened within these walls. Erica nodded, squeezing my shoulder before heading to the kitchen. I will make us some tea while you talk to her. Take your time. Despite the late hour, my mother answered on the second ring, her voice immediately alert with maternal concern. Catherine? Sweetheart, It is nearly midnight. Is everything all right? The question opened a floodgate of words that I had not realized were waiting to pour out. I told her everything. The mysterious phone bills, the grocery store encounter with Judith, the cruel comments at family dinners, and finally the devastating anniversary party that had ended with divorce papers and pregnancy test results creating chaos in equal measure. "Oh, my dear child," my mother whispered when I finished, her voice thick with emotion. "I knew something was wrong. I could hear it in your voice during our last few conversations, but I never imagined they would treat you with such calculated cruelty." Her validation of my experience felt like medicine for wounds I had not known how to treat. "Mom, I am pregnant. The baby they said I could never give them is growing inside me right now." The joy in her voice was immediate and uncomplicated. "Catherine, that is wonderful news. You are going to be a magnificent mother. That child is so lucky to have you." Her enthusiasm stood in stark contrast to the conditional acceptance I had grown accustomed to from Timothy's family. My mother's love for her future grandchild required no performance metrics or biological proof of worthiness. It simply existed, pure and unconditional. "I want to come stay with you for a while," she continued. "Help you get settled, prepare for the baby. You should not have to go through this alone." For the first time in months I felt genuinely excited about the future. "I would love that, Mom. I really would." The months that followed my mother's arrival were unlike anything I had experienced during my marriage. Freed from the constant stress of trying to earn approval that would never come, my body responded to pregnancy with remarkable resilience. Dr. Patterson commented during each appointment about how much healthier and more relaxed I appeared. "Whatever changes you have made in your life," she said during my 5-month checkup, "they are working beautifully. Your blood pressure is perfect. Your weight gain is exactly on track, and honestly, you just look radiant." The pregnancy became a celebration rather than a source of anxiety. Erica organized a baby shower that filled my living room with genuine friends who offered support without conditions. My mother painted the nursery in soft yellow and green, creating a sanctuary that felt warm and welcoming rather than pressured by expectations of producing the next generation of a particular bloodline. When Timothy attempted to contact me through various channels during those months, my lawyer made it clear that the divorce proceedings would continue as planned and that he had no legal claim to involvement in my pregnancy. The signed papers from that devastating evening had created an ironclad barrier that protected both me and my child from further interference. Labor began on a Tuesday morning in late spring, nearly 8 months after the anniversary party that had changed everything. Erica and my mother flanked my hospital bed, offering encouragement and support through each contraction. The delivery room filled with love and anticipation, but it was love freely given rather than love conditional on performance or biological success. When my son finally arrived, healthy, beautiful, and perfect, I felt a completeness that had never existed during my marriage. Holding him for the first time, I understood that this was what unconditional love felt like. Not the desperate scrambling for approval that had characterized my relationship with Timothy's family, but simple, pure acceptance of another human being exactly as they were. "He is gorgeous," Erica whispered, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the baby I had named David Erica Miller. "Absolutely perfect." The middle name honored the friendship that had saved me during my darkest hour, ensuring that my son would always carry a reminder of what